Simon Bombar often came to the conclusion that life was, frankly, a rather unpleasant affair. From birth, he had been gifted with a rare talent, the ability to do absolutely nothing and a passionate commitment to that vocation, without the slightest hesitation. Any effort, whether physical or emotional, seemed beyond his reach. The moment a conversation turned serious, he would grow distracted. His mind could not endure strain, nor was it capable of sustained attention. The son of a fashionable shop owner in Cannes, he lived until the age of 25 without knowing labor or worry, so the family liked to say. But since his parents were always teetering closer to ruin than to wealth, he suffered constantly from a lack of money. Tall, stout, and ruddy-faced, with ginger sideburns in the Norman style, blue eyes, a cheerful and slightly foolish expression, and a belly already beginning to show, he dressed with loud elegance like a provincial bon vivant. At every opportunity he laughed, shouted, gestured wildly, flaunting his boisterous joie de vivre with the confidence of a traveling salesman. He believed life was made solely for revelry and amusement. And when he had to restrain his talkative exuberance, he would lapse into a kind of sleepy stupor, but he never knew how to be sad. The constant need for money gnawed at him, and he often repeated a phrase that became famous among his circle of friends: "For 10,000 fratres a year, I'd gladly become an executioner." Every summer he spent 2 weeks in Trouville to do the season, as he put it. Lodging with relatives who gave up a room for him, he spent every day from arrival to departure strolling the boardwalks that lined the wide sandy beach. He walked with confidence, hands in his pockets or clasped behind his back, dressed in a loose-fitting suit, a pale vest, and a garish tie, his hat tilted rakishly and a cheap cigar clamped in the corner of his mouth. He tried to brush past elegant ladies, eyed the men with a challenging stare, and carried himself like a fellow always ready to pick a fight. And he searched, relentlessly searched. He was looking for a woman, hoping his appearance and physique would aid him in the hunt. He told himself, "Damn it. With so many women flocking here, surely I'll find the one I need." He searched with the instinct of a hunting dog, with Norman tenacity, convinced he would recognize her at first glance, the one who would make him rich. One Monday morning, he muttered to himself, "There she is, there she is." It was a glorious day, one of those July mornings when the sky is a wash of yellow and blue, and the heat seems to pour down like rain. The beach, crowded with people, bloomed with women's dresses like a garden in full color, while fishing boats with brown sails floated almost motionless on the blue water, mirrored upside down as if dozing in the sunlight. They lay scattered along the wooden promenade, some near, some far, some barely visible, as if too lazy to head out to sea or return to port. Beyond the haze, the coast of Le Havre could just be made out, with 2 white dots marking the lighthouses of Saint Adresse. He said to himself, "There she is," when he saw her for the 3rd time and caught her gaze, a direct, confident look from a mature woman who knew exactly what she wanted. He had noticed her before, she too seemed to be searching. An Englishwoman, tall and lean, one of those bold types whom travel and circumstance had turned almost into men. She wasn't unattractive, walked with brisk assurance, dressed plainly, and wore her hair in that peculiar way typical of Englishwomen. Her eyes were striking, her cheekbones prominent and flushed, and her teeth, too long, were always visible. Reaching the port, he turned back, hoping to cross paths with her again. And when he did, he gave her a fiery glance that said, "Here I am." But how to start a conversation? He passed by once more, and as they drew level, she dropped her parasol. He rushed to pick it up and handed it to her. "Allow me, madam." She replied, "Oh, you are very kind." They looked at each other, unsure what to say next. She blushed. Emboldened, he said, "What a lovely day." She whispered, "Oh, delightful." They stood there, awkward but unwilling to part. She was the first to speak. "Are you staying long?" He smiled. "Oh yes. As long as I please." Then, suddenly, he offered, "Would you care to walk to the pier? "It's wonderful there on days like this." She calmly replied, "Gladly." And off they went side by side, she walking firmly and confidently, he waddling like a turkey with its tail fanned. 3 months later, on a fine morning, every respectable merchant in Cannes received a letter in a large white envelope. Mr. and Mrs. Prosper Bombar have the honor of announcing the forthcoming marriage of their son, Mr. Simon Bombar, to the widow Mrs. Kate Robertson. And on the reverse, Mrs. Kate Robertson, widow, has the honor of announcing her forthcoming marriage to Mr. Simon Bombar. They settled in Paris. The bride's fortune provided an annual income of 15,000 francs. Simon requested 400 francs a month for personal expenses. He had to prove that his marital devotion merited such generosity, and he did so with ease. At first, everything went smoothly. Madame Bombar was no longer young, her freshness had faded, but she had a way of making demands that rendered refusal impossible. With her firm English accent, she would say, "Oh, Simon, let's go to bed," and he would obediently follow, like a dog told to sit. She knew how to express her wishes, day or night, in a manner that dissolved all resistance. She never raised her voice, never made scenes, never showed irritation or offense. But when she spoke, it was always at the right moment, in a tone that allowed no contradiction. Simon sometimes hesitated, but each time he yielded to her brief and commanding requests. Soon, however, he began to find marital affection bland. And since he had enough money to buy kisses with more flavor, he indulged himself until he was thoroughly sated. Madame Bombar had noticed it, though Simon couldn't begin to imagine how. One evening, with quiet composure, she announced that she had rented a house in Mantes, where they would now reside. Life grew noticeably heavier for Bombar. He tried every form of amusement, but none could silence the craving for conquest, the small, sweet triumphs that so delighted his heart. He took up fishing and quickly mastered its subtleties, where the gudgeon preferred to linger, where the carp or roach might be found, which banks were best for catching bream, and which bait tempted which fish. Yet even as he watched the trembling float ripple across the water's surface, his thoughts drifted elsewhere, toward very different images. He grew friendly with the chief clerk of the sub-prefecture and the captain of the gendarmerie. In the evenings, they gathered at the commercial café to play a few rounds of whist. But even then, as his eyes scanned the queen of clubs or diamonds, his imagination faltered. The absence of legs on those double-headed figures disrupted the fantasies he tried to conjure. So he devised a plan, clever, worthy of a true Norman. He persuaded his wife to hire a maid tailored precisely to his needs, not a flirt, not a fashion plate, but a robust, ruddy, broad-shouldered woman who aroused no suspicion and whom he carefully groomed for his scheme. The maid was recommended by the customs director, a helpful friend and, in truth, a co-conspirator who vouched for her in every respect. Madame Bombar, trusting, accepted the treasure sent her. Simon was pleased, but his happiness came at the cost of constant caution, fear, and elaborate precautions. His wife's vigilant presence allowed him only rare, fleeting moments, each one tinged with anxiety. He spent weeks crafting a ruse, a tactical maneuver, and at last found one that suited him perfectly. Madame Bombar went to bed early, while Simon played whist and returned home precisely at 9:30. He arranged for Victorine to wait for him in the dark, on the staircase between the foyer and the corridor. He had no more than 5 minutes, always afraid of being caught off guard. But 5 minutes were enough to satisfy his desire. Never stingy with pleasure, Simon would slip a louis into the maid's hand, and she would hastily retreat to her attic room. While fishing for bleak, he would chuckle to himself, triumphant, and like King Midas's barber whisper to the reeds along the shore, "Fooled the mistress." And truth be told, the very act of deceiving Madame Bombar redeemed, in his eyes, the blandness and incompleteness of his purchased victories. But one evening, as usual, he met Victorine on the stairs, and this time, she seemed livelier, more animated than usual. He lingered in the corridor for a full 10 minutes. When he entered the marital bedroom, Madame Bombar was nowhere to be seen. A chill ran down his spine, and he sank heavily into a chair, seized by a grim premonition. She appeared, candle in hand. He asked nervously, "Did you go out?" She replied calmly, "I went to the kitchen for a glass of water." He tried to dispel any suspicions she might have had, but she seemed serene, content, trusting. His anxiety gradually subsided. The next morning, they came to breakfast in the dining room. Victorine served the cutlets. As she placed the dish and straightened up, Madame Bombar extended a gold coin, holding it delicately between 2 fingers, and said in her steady, serious tone, "Here you are, my dear, 20 francs I deprived you of last night. I'm returning them now." The stunned maid took the coin, staring at it with a vacant expression, while Simon, utterly bewildered, gaped at his wife with wide, astonished eyes.